Welcome everyone, another great video. Should I delay my retirement? I'm worried about the market. That is a very common question, one we receive from time to time, one folks certainly have been asking through our comment section and through our forum. So we're going to tackle that today, Kevin. Let's dive right in. The first piece, and I think people are going to see this coming with the Becker Orr mantra, but before you get too far into retirement, delay retirement, delay retirement, you need to have a plan.
Yeah, that's the biggest first step, is having a plan. Do you want to delay retirement? Well, if you don't know what your plan is, then how can you possibly know whether you should be delaying it or not? You need to know what you're sketching out. What do I want to do in retirement? That will come up with, what are my expenses? What do I need to look at? When do I want to retire? How long do I think I'm going to live? All these sort of things need to be factored in before you can really make a serious scenario. And you can't do any of that unless you put that plan together. The financial plan is going to be the biggest contributor to when that retirement time frame should come.
And part of it is, if short-term market turbulence, if the volatility has a big impact on your plan, that's not a really good retirement plan. The next month or two or next year or two of the market should not have a big impact on whether or not you're able to retire. The idea of a plan is it lasts for a couple of decades. It doesn't last just for the next month or the next 2 months or the next year. So that short-term market performance, no one likes going through turbulence, but if you are very worried about that short-term performance, well, then probably the plan's not as good. So like you mentioned, you have that in-depth plan. That in-depth plan helps alleviate some of the worry, so you're more focused on your goals in the longer term and less focused on the short-term performance. So that's the first big key, is going to be the plan. The second is related directly to the market part of the equation. I'm worried about the markets. Well, that could mean perhaps you've taken a little too much risk.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the biggest factor you just mentioned. If you're really worried about market performance, then you are probably in that category where you're taking too much risk, where if the market goes down 10%, oh, I can't retire, I don't have enough there anymore. Well, your plan probably isn't sitting there, but you probably have too much risk if that's the case that's going on. Risk is a big factor. Everybody thinks that they are really acceptable with risk when everything's going up, but the minute it starts to come down, that's when you really get to know it. And it's not about whether or not the investments you have are really very risky. Maybe you're holding bank stock or something like that, but it's a matter of peace of mind for you. If you feel that you can't retire because there's too much risk there, your portfolio probably has more than you're comfortable with, and that's not a problem. It's something, though, that you have to deal with and work out on your own.
Yeah, no one likes it when the market gets turbulent. No one likes to see a little volatility in the marketplace or in their investments. But if that is really letting you not sleep at night, really causing some stress and some concern, well, then perhaps you need to revisit your portfolio. And it's more to do with your feelings on the turbulence than the portfolio itself. It's how you feel when that happens. And that's going to change, right? At 22 versus 42 versus 62, you'll probably feel a little different when that turbulence hits. And it's perfectly fine for you to adjust your portfolio as you go through those phases. So if you are very worried about it, well, then maybe you're just taking too much risk in the portfolio. We should mention risk and return are connected. So the idea that I want 10%, but I don't want any risk just doesn't exist anymore. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So you just have to accept what I don't want the risk, but I want to sleep at night. So maybe I'll get a lower return. I'll get a guarantee, and that is perfectly fine. But it's that level that if you're really worried, one, you have a plan, and then number two, perhaps you revisit the risk in the portfolio. And we get questions of this nature all the time. Where should folks go if they have a question, Kevin?
They should go to chatwithclintonandkevin.com. We'd be more than happy to take an analysis to see whether or not you have the risk in your portfolio you deserve, or whether you should be less risk-oriented, or if you're comfortable with what you have, or if you've got any other questions on the financial plan or things along those lines. We're more than happy to answer those questions, and that would be perfectly okay with us to send in more and more so that we can get those answers to you quick. But we've done 2 points so far, Clint. Do we have more that we have to worry about in this sort of situation?
Or we're still answering that question. Should I delay my retirement? I'm worried about the market. We talked about the importance of the plan. We talked about how you might feel about risk, perhaps taking too much risk. And then also we have to mention time horizons. Usually this framing is very short-term in nature, right? If someone is mentioning, I'm worried about the market, should I delay my retirement? They typically think of the next year or the next 2 years. They're not thinking 10 years from now, 15 years from now. They're thinking short-term, which is understandable, but perhaps doesn't actually line up with their true time frames. So I will pull this up here, Kevin, and you can help us understand perhaps the true length of retirement.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly. I mean, I think most people start thinking maybe their late 50s or early 60s as to, okay, well, should I be able to retire? And if you're worried about those short-term scenarios, again, as Clint's mentioned many times here, it is a short-term scenario for the market scenario, or the market's going down. It's not a long-term thing. And if you look at the age of 60, for both sexes, you're almost 23 years you should be living on the average to be able to go that. That is a long-term time frame. Even at 65, you're looking at almost 20 years. So again, These are not areas that you have to worry about. It's more of a time horizon thing that you want to look at. Am I going to be retired for 20 years? That's a long-term time frame. These short-term markets probably won't be a big effect. I mean, if you're 75 or 80 and you're still working, maybe you got a bit of a different situation there. And, short-term time frame, if I've got 8 years to live, that may not be the big thing. But yeah, your time horizon is really an important factor for how this risk is working out. Don't let the short-term area of the market on a long-term retirement really be the key deciding factor as to whether I should retire today or whether I should wait 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll pull it back up just so folks can understand the data there. I should mention Statistics Canada. That's what they look at, these life expectancy numbers. And often we hear life expectancy, it's 70 or 75, whatever the number is. But that's an average. That does include folks that unfortunately pass away when they're younger. That kind of pulls the average down. This is looking at healthy adults at the various ages. And like you mentioned, Kevin, if someone's healthy and they're 60, well, in Canada, that means they're probably going to live another 20, 24 years, depending, which means likely they'll make it to that 80, 85 range, which is what plans are based off. It's based off that longer term. Most retirements are a couple of decades, not just a couple of years. You want to make sure you have that appropriate time frame in mind. So have a plan, let that guide you. If you're really worried, we'll revisit the risk and then have a good understanding of the timeline that actually matches your retirement. That can help solve the dilemma of being a little worried and wanting to delay your retirement. Got lots of other videos, Kevin, especially one floating on the screen right now. Behaviors that put a comfortable retirement at risk. You like this video, you'll love that one. Click on it. We'll see you again very soon.
Take care.